Well, welcome everybody to Mud Flood Was Armageddon. Mud Flood was Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. I I also would like to see Randy pop in at any time now because I'm in kind of a mood, and plus I don't like to make history by myself when I'm unveiling a lot of things. And I think I've got a couple of things tonight, not as important as what I want to get through. Defending the end in scripture from Nazi brainwash false prophets. That's quite a statement. It doesn't mean they're Nazis, the people that I think are kind of misunderstanding scripture. I think they're Nazi brainwashed. That's a big difference. But Static in the Attic has gone a little bit on the side that I think needs to be avoided. Did they flip the script? It's basically the Jews did everything wrong, the Gnostics were right, and they flipped the switch, and we've got to watch out now because their Jews are running America. It's Nazi-esque. Yes, there's a conspiracy, and we'll get to it, no doubt about it. But right now, blaming them in this way as if they'd done it by themselves, as this hasn't been a long plan of Satan being loosed. And it's not only the United States, it's Germany who helped them also. There's no good guys.
And then they reappropriated this idea of these holy men that lived this austere lifestyle. I talked about how the Church of Rome systematically removed the Cathars from the earth and our history. And then they reappropriated this idea of these holy men that lived this austere lifestyle, forsaking earthly comforts, changed it and told us that it was their holy monks that lived like this. So they took the story of the Cathars, who the
Okay, so basically, what are we seeing here? We're seeing Static in the Attic have us forget that for the last 2 years, he was been poo-pooing the mud flood movement and the added 1,000 years, and they could do this and they can do that. But now the Jews in the United States are looking bad because they're convicted of doing genocide and things like that, rightfully so. So all of a sudden it's like, yeah, now it makes sense. That type of blowing with the wind to put it out there. And then he's going to get into the red heifers and everything else with enough of the, I'm not saying I believe it, but they believe it. So, oh boy, red heifers. Wow. Such a distraction from what we were going to learn.
locals called the good men, put them to the sword, and then told later generations, nah, those holy men that used to wander the hills, those guys were with us. So they completely flipped the script. At that time, they actually erased every other religion out there in Europe except for one. You want to guess what that one religion is?
Jews.
First rule of YouTube, you don't talk about them. While
It's
all those
Jewish people. You do talk about them. You talk about them in this context. You don't make it all mysterious, like, oh boy, I'm glad you're finally into the added 1,000 years and that, but it seems like a way to get hits by jumping on something popular, a lot like Paul from Understanding Conspiracy. Not even a flat earther, appealing to flat earthers because he's into the short season. This is all one plan. It's the Rosicrucians, it's the Jesuits, it's the John Birch Society.
those other religions saw Jesus as a good thing. The one religion that they left alongside the Church of Rome was out there telling everybody that Jesus was the bastard son of a whore. But they were allowed to continue doing this because they were allies and they allowed them to commit usury against everybody and inflict financial devastation on kings, queens, and nobility. It's not often I find something shockingly new about history. This is one of those finds, but I have to be very delicate in how.
This is all new to him? It can't be. It can't be. It's what we've been talking about. It's what other people have been talking about. And he's been poo pooing, saying, oh, the cities only look empty because they couldn't focus their cameras back then. That was this Static in the Attic. And now they flipped the switch. Oh, watch out. We should hunker down in America. You'll see where this is going.
I present it, because once again, they have completely flipped the script. So, if you already know about the red heifer sacrifice that's supposed to bring about the end of days, go ahead and skip forward. But eligible red heifers came of age last October 15th. And 1 week before this,
You know, he was talking about it then like it was going to be imminent because of the October 7th deal. Just jump ahead a little bit. So here we go. Pick it up, flipping the switch.
the traditional one that was used, but you take and you mix the ashes with the water and you sprinkle it on the priest to purify them. Well, why do they need purified? It's a requirement to be able to go onto the Temple Mount, which right now has the most sacred mosque in the world to, let's call them the Mohammeds.
Right. And do they really expect the Most High Spirit to come down and bless this and fill the temple and give its presence? Or is this just going to be another false idol if it even happens? Let's go up to about that 5-minute mark, what he was talking about. It looks like kind of like that the Alpine theme, peaceful village.
Of human animals. Does that sound familiar? Like the strip right now? And I can show you 2 videos over on Rumble that will completely change your paradigm. I'll leave links to these in my community post because if I put it in the video, then I get messed with. One is Benjamin Friedman's speech, where he explains who I'm going to call the Rhinelanders had become an economic powerhouse that rivaled Britain's industrial and economic supremacy. And the whole goal of the Dubs was to eliminate the chance that they could ever become.
The whole chance of the world wars was to stop Germany from ruling the world, because this seems like this is pretty much the whole Nazis the good guy. Henry Ford was right. Charles Lindbergh. The United States felt like that too. As a matter of fact, that whole Jesse Owens story in the Olympics was a setup because they had the one drop rule where Jesse Owens couldn't ride on trains with white people in America. It wasn't like, they had different policies than Germany. They had eugenics laws. The United States was like Germany. It wasn't, oh, they're our enemies. Hitler had a picture of Ford on his desk. Panzer engines were built by Ford Motor Company Deutschland.
Significant players on the world stage again. It was the same exact story with the U.S. Civil War and eliminating the South. He also explains how the unmentionables controlled all of the U.S. newspapers, still do, and how they all of a sudden started vilifying the Rhinelanders as modern day barbaric Huns, even though a huge percentage of American families descended from the Rhineland. Just look at that little monster there. It would take me 10 videos to straighten out the truth from what you've been told. I had already worked my way through.
Somehow, though, it's the white guys are really the ones discriminated against. We could have been to having a nice, peaceful world, but it had to change.
With the Dub. They literally wanted to erase their seed from the earth, G-side, so they could never again grow into an industrial economic powerhouse. They actually bragged today about turning cities like Dresden to rubble. And the same exact thing is going on today in the Strip. And there's a lot of nerve in claiming to be the oppressed once you really understand what's going on.
I think it's a lot of nerve for white people to seem like they've been oppressed by the small Jewish race. Because they keep thinking that this is a restoration and not a judgment. This is a judgment. How does the Bible end? In judgment. One group of saints running for their lives. They're the last ones killed. Saved by fire. Blessed. That's your rescue, and it's not even close right now. Because things are going to get a lot worse, because this is a judgment. Sorry, white people working together to stop the immigration and everything else is not going to work.
Was starving. But I see a lot of roofs to be under at least. And I dare not go into specifics about this at this time, nor show a lot of photos. I'm going to have to just mix things here. But let me just read you a few quotes from this video. There's also a book, Other Losses, but in the documentary, they interview actual survivors. By the end,
this is old history, that they bombed Dresden, firebombed everything. Eisenhower's death camps. This was the end of World War II. And I'm going to get into and show you what was really going on at the end of World War II. And how was it? Where did Chiang Kai-shek go when we look at some of like the Treaty of Yalta, the Malta, Order of Malta, the Teutonic Knights? Yeah. And how come the John Birch Society hated Eisenhower? Because somehow they aided and abetted Mao Zedong coming to power and not Chiang Kai-shek. And that's been the inside battle of the CIA and the FBI since World War II, when the CIA was founded from the Office of Strategic Services or some crap.
End of 1944, the people of the Rhineland were expiring, their cities in flames, their forces surrounded, outnumbered, and retreating on every front. And still, the conquering allies were afraid of them despite their overwhelming offensive strength. Winston Churchill was concerned the spirit of the Rhineland would rise again and they would attack the British Empire. American Roosevelt was concerned that Rhineland industrialists would rise again and conquer world markets. Like I said, it's all about the Benjamins.
It's all about the Benjamin. He's got it all figured out. Now, he's 6 months ago, the cities were empty because of photography, and everybody that thought we couldn't build those cities was crazy. And now it's this. Isn't that convenient? I think it's super convenient.
Of leaflets promising peace, food, and shelter if they surrendered. The next phase of the plan was devised by Roosevelt's friend, Henry C. Morgenthau, who was Secretary of Treasury. In their meeting in Quebec, Roosevelt approved the Morgenthau plan to pastoralize the Rhineland. But Churchill, of all people, said it was unnatural, unchristian, and unnecessary. To his credit, Churchill did later say, "We slaughtered the wrong pig," and even Patton woke up to the idea that we defeated the wrong enemy.
They always knew it was a plan. Patton was one of the people with Eisenhower that when they needed Blackjack Pershing to attack the bonus army because they hadn't paid them for their service in World War I, and now there was an economic Great Depression, they were the people, Eisenhower and Patton, who rolled out on United States veterans. They were the ones who wanted racial purity. Yeah, they didn't like the Jewish people anymore because, well, neither did Henry Ford and Charles Lindbergh and the Bund Society and everyone else in the United States.
Really stop for a second and think about that. I'm looking at some rather fitting images here, but I can't show them.
Right. Then he's not showing any of the Henry Ford, the Protocols of Zion, the Charles Lindbergh, the Bellamy Salute, the one drop rule that was in effect in the United States. You've all seen it. The eugenic laws of Virginia that are word for word put into the Nazi genetic laws. We were them, they were us. This was a plan. The only hitch in their giddy up was, how did Mao Zedong end up in charge?
Morgenthau convinced Roosevelt to offer Churchill an enormous bribe of $6 billion to approve the plan. Roosevelt and Churchill secretly approved the plan in September. Within a few weeks, the press discovered that the Morgenthau plan would starve the people of the Rhineland after the Dub. This enraged the people of North America and Britain, who wanted peace, not vengeance.
You know
The
it.
Allies said in a press conference that he was at. Soon after, typhoid fever and all kinds of other disease broke out. And he said that when food did arrive, they would give one loaf to each commander who was in charge of 100 men. You still have rank and file even when detained, but each commander in charge of 100 men would get one loaf of bread. And that's when it actually came in, which
And so it wasn't, it was the white people suffering. The Germans that suffered, you know. It wasn't that the Nazis went in and stormed Poland and killed all the Romanians, and they basically were the you know, they're the victims here. And yet white people in America are the victims. This is the last holdout for their manifest destiny, and you better believe they're going to fight for it.
into the money lenders. The Trimmerfrauen, which I can't say, or the rubble women, removed the mortar off of all the bricks, brick by brick, to rebuild the cities. I have personally done this to build a patio, and it's
He's personally told us how, because he's a contractor, he knows that people could have built those mud flood buildings in the 1800s in the time allotted in those 1 year periods. At least that was his strong defense in how he was, you know, oh, Antica Tech, my butt. But now there's this. And I bet a lot of people are whipped up into a frenzy of like, man, we've got to, oh man, you know, Germany has been great to been there. Who knows? Who knows what they're saying? But it's not that simple, people. The Nazis were not the good guys, and neither is the United States. Let's see what else we've got here. So I've got a lot of this goes over here. The bombing of Dresden was a crazy thing. You know, the Polish people didn't even want to do it, but they made them do it. Polish crews designated, you know, they almost, you know, mutinied. Is that the thing? Because of the terms of the Yalta Agreement. Well, that was held the same day they decided, like, oh, we're going to go firebomb these people now. We just must have gotten the phone call from Yalta, go bomb them. Take out Bonn, Hanover, Nuremberg, Dresden. Just so they did. 1,000-pound indicators, 200,000 incendiaries for Dresden, just because they wanted to kill people. It wasn't that they were picking on white people, they were killing people everywhere. And some survivors ended up with shell shock and needed lobotomies and ended up in those insane asylums. This was just out and out murder. And it was all part of, you know, and look at there. Is that chemtrails from a propeller plane? Yes, it certainly looks like it. But who knows? So the Dresden thing just destroyed it. Any pictures of Dresden here after the bombing? Potsdam conference. We'll look at some of those. Operation Unthinkable. Don't even have time to get into that. Look at where's Chiang Kai-shek? Because there was always the big four. China was supposed to be helping them, and then all of a sudden, when the war is as good as over in February 1945, and think of that, December 7th, the United States got involved. That's 1942. 42, 43, 43, 44, 44, 45. Like, not even 4 years. And it's all people talk about to this day. Where's Chiang Kai shek? How come Mao Zedong is going to end up? These guys won the war with Chiang Kai shek, and now he's gone. What's the Potsdam Conference? Well, Truman made it here because the other one, that had a press that never showed him in a wheelchair. This is now in the Soviet occupation zone from July 17th to August 2nd. When did they start dropping the fake nuclear weapons? Wasn't it like the 6th and the 9th or something like that? It was right around this time. Wanted to avoid the Paris Peace Conference and the armistice they signed then. Again, no Chiang Kai shek, no Mao Zedong. Yet there was some John Birch shenanigans going on in the CIA and the FBI. And of course, everybody knows that FDR's cabinet was influenced with communist spies from the very beginning. And well, he knew it too. So they had these 9 meetings, everything was filled out, and then they agreed to, well, what did they actually do? Final decisions. Germany's going to be divided into 4 different things. Vietnam's in their future. That's going to be partitioned. And the Soviets reaffirmed their Yalta promise, the unmentioned in the Yalta article, to promptly launch an invasion of the Japanese held areas, because who was winning World War II and probably could have held out if it took a whole army to get Iwo Jima? How are they going to get Japan unless they just firebombed the whole place? So again, meeting in castles, affecting everything. So here's what Stalin said he would do, but he's not going to deal with Chiang Kai shek in another nationalist country. Their plan was to deal with the communist Mao Zedong. John Birch and his crew didn't like that at all. This is what you basically call a pincher movement, all coming into Manchukuo, Mukden. I know Manchukuo was it's Mongolia. It's where everything in the Bible in Asia, all of Asia has departed me. It was just too much. And it all started at the time of the beginning was supposedly they dropped the first atomic weapon, and they wrapped it up in a week later and said, oh, we dropped another atomic weapon. Japan was totally surrounded and defeated in a double cross move because they were, they had a treaty that the Soviets wouldn't attack Japan until the Nazis surrendered. Then they had to wait a month. So they waited a month and 1 minute. And then the Soviet Union said, it's over. We're teaming up with Japan, attacking Manchukuo, the puppet state that lasted from 1932 to 1945. That is what, brought about the John Birch Society later in a rebellion to, why in the world did we ever, have Taiwan? Why did Chiang Kai shek end up in Taiwan? And we're still fighting over that today because it was probably an armistice too. Who knows what really happened? It's an image that still shocks in its feral intensity. July 14th, 1964, supporters of Barry Goldwater, the arch conservative senator from Arizona, whom the Republican Party was preparing to crown as its presidential nominee, unleashed a torrent of boos against New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller. Wow, things were really going on there in 64 because, well, Kennedy had been assassinated. You know, Lyndon Johnson was there. That's Barry Goldwater there on the right. Somehow, a Jewish person is running as a super conservative in the Republican Party. Wow. You know, mentions it here. What's less remembered is why Rockefeller, who had lost the nomination to Goldwater, was standing behind the lectern in the first place to speak in support of an amendment to the party platform that would condemn political extremism. The resolution repudiated the efforts of irresponsible extremist organization, including the Communist Party, the Ku Klux Klan, and the John Birch Society. This article is just saying so long before the QAnon and the Proud Boy, these things were set up and planned well ahead of time. Why do I have Sarah T. Hughes pulled up? Well, because she's a big part of Barry Goldwater, Lyndon Johnson's life. First federal woman judge appointed, first and only woman to have sworn in a president. That's right. When they needed somebody to ask no questions, get over here and swear in Lyndon Johnson and make it legal. Well, he was the guy that appointed her. She was best known to him. She's they were friends. Go get Sarah Hughes, is the way they say it in the movies. And so they did. He had her put in place. She was there. And how does that story end up? Well, it ends up, and I'll show you in the thing, with Roe versus Wade and abortion becoming legal. Of course, Goldwater didn't win. Of course, Sarah Hughes stayed in the Texas and worked her way up until Roe versus Wade, when she was the judge that said, yeah, this is unconstitutional. This girl deserves an abortion. And it went to the Supreme Court and they passed that law, and they had one Republican vote for it. Do you know who that was? Take a guess. Yeah, it was Barry Goldwater. Isn't it funny how these things all work out? Because the end was written from the beginning. And anyone wasting their time saying, now I know it was the Jews all along, and we can just restore America again, and it'll be great again, and we can all go on cruises again. Maybe, maybe not. Probably, maybe not. Sarah Hughes graduated, bleeding bomb. Throughout her lifetime, she was known for her speedy and impartial administration, assisted in establishing Dallas's first juvenile. Hughes was involved in multiple court decisions, including the Roe versus Wade. That's right. Taking it to the Supreme Court. She was right there, put in position because of her senior status. And then after that was done, she said, I'm out of here. I've done my duty. I'm going to retire. I've got 7 years to live, and she's going to be happy. They got a wax, the dress she's wearing is on a, was destroyed by fire, but it was in a wax museum. Wow. Hey, here's, this is the continuation of the problem. This guy seems to, want to serve the Lord, but when you think that the local church is a beachhead for restoring society, you're not looking at the end of the Bible. This is not going to be a restoration. This is going to be a yikes, let's run for your life. And you know where a good place to not be when it starts? The big cities, or even a medium-sized city. There is no restoring this society. That's all a lot of manifest destiny BS. Yeah, oh, the poor Rhinelanders, getting schools to breed white people. That's how desperate those Jews got them. They had to build these schools for, you know, just to breed children because they needed them. And they based it on the Teutonic Order. That's where they got the word, borrowed by the Nazis from the historic Teutonic Order. Yeah, from 1190, oh, the brothers of the German house of St. Mary in Jerusalem. Sure. Right. You believe that? They do. That's what's important, right? Isn't that what Static said? Adolf Hitler schools, it was all white. And the United States had the same laws. They had the same laws. Don't forget that. They had the one drop rule. They had the eugenics. They had separate drinking fountains. They couldn't vote until 1964. It was legal discrimination based on pseudoscience. You know, and they put them all in the medieval castles, so they would have the largest gymnasium. Because why? Because they filling up old mud flooded buildings like everyone else was doing. And this is their cover story. Man, come on. This isn't going to be the big restoration if we could just start going to church right. Even if women start wearing head coverings. I'm not saying everything's going to get great. This guy here, he's like me. He wants women to wear head coverings, but nobody listens to him either. His wife's the only one in church that does it, but it doesn't matter because that's not the big deal. Head coverings. It's just one of the things that, we think the Bible teaches. What is this Teutonic Order? Well, it's just a Roman Catholic religious thing because that's what this is. It's all Jesuits sweeping up. It's all Jesuits founding homeschools like where I worked so that we could brainwash people into loving the United States because soon those homeschool children will be the only ones that know how to read. Again, should be obvious. Is it 1191 or 1911 when the laws and the racism was at its peak and all the countries were going to play a game of risk and just see who really was this survival of the fittest group? This is absolutely, everybody that you hear about, Transylvania, Tartaria, you know, mud flood buildings. It's all right there. And it's all, forget the Middle Ages. These were, these are Bible times. We're living in Bible times. Kind of wrapping this up now. Here's the military order of Malta. This is a big one too. 1048, that, take away the four, that's could be one of the false Christs or false, religious orders that, Jesus warned about at that time. Those are about the size of the boats that Paul's describes that, where, a safe harbor where no boats with oars can go. When Paul would be in this, a couple of his shipwrecks, they mentioned that they had like 300 people on board, passengers. This is our world. It was their world. It's a lie. The white people are set up. Yeah, we're the patsies right now. The rest of the world is not going to feel sorry for us because we can't run the world with mythical petrodollars anymore. The rest of the world is happy understanding, okay, we've got, they're going to go on with life. They're going to pay the Chinese or the Russians anything they want because that's, in their mind, because they don't know. They think they're going to be, restored and revenged, and China's going to get their revenge for the opium wars and how they got double crossed, and Chiang Kai-shek should have been a great democratic nation by now. Instead, they're stuck on the island of Formosa, I mean Taiwan. Yeah, and we're still paying these old treaties to these falcon things. I couldn't find the one. There's a picture of Ronald Reagan paying the tribute of a falcon to the Prince of Monaco back in '84, but didn't think of it in time. I wish that Randy was here, because I was going to break some news about this new Bible theory I have. Maybe I'll save it for tomorrow. But here's a preview of it. We're going to talk about Hiram, king of Tyre, because, well, let me pop open a new tab here, because when I'll just show you in Ezekiel, when we talk about, and everybody talks about it. What is it? Is it Ezekiel 27? The lament for Tyre, the king of Tyre. And he's that builder, your decks of pines, coast of Cyprus, fine embroidery from linen, from Egypt, Persia, Lud, and Put were in your army. Tarshish did business with you. Your rowers have brought you out on the high sea, your riches, your wares. Wow. Let's see. Tyre, I think, is what they compare to the fall of Satan, isn't it? Because you said in this is a prophecy against the prince of Tyre. Is that like the descendants of Haman? Because you said in your heart, I am a god. I sat in the seats of the God, but you are a man, no God. You're indeed wiser than Daniel, no secrets hidden from you. Because you make your heart like that of a god. Lament over the king of Tyre. You were the signet of perfection, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. This is the king of Tyre. This guy? I'm not saying this is a type or even an analogy. We're going to have to wait and discuss this. This guy, king of Tyre? What would he do? Now, Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants to Solomon when he heard that they had anointed him king in place of his father, for Hiram had always loved David, and Solomon sent word to that guy, king of Tyre. Man, he had some pretty harsh prophecies there, didn't he? But they were good friends, and hey, David had prepared all this stuff for you. He goes in verse 5, and so I intend to build a house for the name of the Lord of my God, as the Lord said to my father David, your son, whom I will set on your throne in your place, shall build the house for my name. Now, therefore, hey, get the cedars. My servants will join your servants, and I will pay you for your servants such wages as you set, for you know there is no one among us who can cut timber like the Sidonians. Hiram heard the words of Solomon, rejoiced greatly. He was ready to make some money. They did make a lot of money. Hiram supplied the timbers, the cypress. Hiram, was paid 20,000 cores of wheat as food for his house, 20,000 of beaten oil. So he was well paid while it was getting done. He draft force labor out of the people. 70,000 burden bearers, 80,000 stone cutters, 3,300 chief officers that were just in charge of saying, hey, are you sure your people are working hard enough? And at the king's command, they quarried out great stones, costly stones, in order to lay the foundation of the houses with dressed stones, because David had saved so much money, it was all paid for. Just go for it. So, how many years after they left Israel? I'm glad you asked. It was 480. 480 years after the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt. It was the fourth year, because they had to do all the work, of the reign of Solomon. Second month, they began building the house because they had cut all the stones and everything at the quarry. We'll read about that. King Solomon built the house 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, 30 cubits high, sacred geometry much. The vestibule in the front of the nave of the house was 20 cubits, equal to the width of the house, 10 cubits deep to the front of the house. He made the house windows, recessed frames. We've all seen that. We know what, when they're describing a star fort. So let's move down to verse 7. When the house was built, it was built with stone prepared at the quarry, so that neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron was heard in the house while it was building. And that's the way you do it, man. That's how you do it. Hiram, King Hiram, he's the man. He could do it. He built it. They didn't even want to hear a hammer. Then you won't hear a hammer. We'll cut it at the quarry. Big stone. Solomon built it and furnished it. Hiram did all the hard work, I guess, but they were going to make, the most holy place. This was going to be blessed by God, and it was. Hiram, what? I want to overlay everything inside with pure gold, even the stones, so that if they ever tear them apart, they're going to want to tear them apart to get the gold. Big. Can't even describe, what's going on in these massive star forts. He carved engraved figures of cherubim, palm trees, open flowers, the floor of the house overlaid with gold in the inner outer rooms, the inner sanctuary, olive wood, 5-sided, 2 doors of olive wood covered with cherubim, palm trees, also made for the entrance nave door post of olive wood in the form of a square, 2 doors of cypress wood. Why are all those doors so big and elaborate? I don't know. Maybe Solomon and Hiram liked it that way, and then everybody else in the world copied it. And King Hiram maybe got a little too big for his britches. We'll find out. We're almost not halfway there. Solomon built his thing. It took about 13 years. 100 cubits, 50 cubits, 30 cubits. But again, with the sacred geometry, it wasn't just that he made his house. All these other things you could just drop in anyway. 45 pillars? Wow. Well, I guess that's what you call it, the house of pillars. 50, 30. Hall of Thrones. Well, that probably was pretty nice. Hall of Judgment. Yeah, okay. Hiram, can you do it? Hiram can do anything. Hiram did all the work, cast the pillars of bronze 18 cubits high, 12 cubits in its circumference. Casting bronze like that. So these people were not, that's hard work. And again, these are, probably those 2 pillars, Jacob and Boaz. So the Freemasons make a pretty big deal out about that. Lot here, but we got to keep moving on. We're going to get, what one did I start at? Ezekiel 28, 1 Kings 9. Okay. The ark was brought into the temple and it was super blessed. God blessed it. It seems like the Lord was really happy. Solomon said, the Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness. I have indeed built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell forever. It does sound like it was pretty darn nice. David couldn't do it, but he paid for everything. There's a list of the things that he paid for. And then Solomon prayed, with his less than 80 words or something like that. Oh Lord God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth beneath, keeping covenant and showing steadfast love to your servants who walk before you with all their heart. You have kept with your servant David, my father, what you declared to him. You spoke with your mouth, with your hand, you have fulfilled it this day. Now, therefore, O Lord God of Israel, keep for your servant David, my father, what you have promised him, saying, you shall not lack a man to sit before me on the throne of Israel. If only your sons pay close attention to their way, to walk before me as you have walked before me. Now, therefore, O God of Israel, let your word be confirmed, which you have spoken to your servant David, my father. But will God indeed dwell on earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house I have built? Yet have regard to the prayer of your servant and to his plea, O Lord my God, listening to the cry and to the prayer that your servant prays before you this day, that your eyes may be open night and day toward this house that your servant prays before you this day, that your eyes may be open night and day towards this house, the place of which you have said, my name shall be there, that you may listen to the prayers that your servant offers towards this place, and listen to the plea of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray towards this place, and listen in heaven, your dwelling place, and when you hear, forgive. Amen. If a man sins against his neighbor and is made to take an oath and comes and swears his oath before the altar in this house, then hears in heaven and act and judge your servants, condemning the guilty by bringing his conduct on his own head and vindicating the righteous by rewarding him. And so he does, he prays for Israel. And he brings in, likewise, when a foreigner comes from a far country, for they shall hear of your great name. Even then, they were accepting foreigners. It was nothing like a racial type of a situation. Again, this is a much longer prayer than the one in Chronicles. Solomon's benediction, Solomon's sacrifices, and God blesses. He comes into the temple. He anoints it. He appears to Solomon. It's a good time. Now, here we go. Back to the king of Tyre. He did all of this and he got paid well. And he got paid by other people wanting to emulate those mud flood sacred geometry buildings, and they would build them to their own gods. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians, as commonly said. Let's look at 1 Kings chapter 9, verse 10. At the end of 20 years in which Solomon had built the two houses, the house of the Lord, the king's house, here comes that proud Hiram, I think. Hiram, king of Tyre, had supplied Solomon with cedar and cypress and timber and gold as much as he desired. King Solomon gave to Hiram 20 cities in the land of Galilee. But when Hiram came from Tyre to see the cities that Solomon had given him, they did not please him. Therefore, he said, what kind of cities are these that you have given me, my brother? So they are called the land of Cabal to this day. Hiram had sent to the king 120 talents of gold. Wow. So I think that there's a little, when did Hiram think, he deserved more? I don't know. We looked at that. Maybe we'll look at, Ezekiel 28 again. And this is the account of the forced labor King Solomon drafted to build the house of the Lord. Wow. And again, Megiddo right there. Solomon not happy. Probably not happy. 420 talents. Ophir, seamen were familiar with the sea. It took 3 years for them to go cut down the trees and bring them back. And they kept it rolling. Then the Queen of Sheba came, but that's a different topic for another night. You were the signet of perfection. Lament over the king of Tyre. And a lot of people think that they're talking about this is Satan. Is that how the tie-in? It's not a pure type because the Bible would say it was a type, but I'm seeing some sort of like a thing in heaven where Satan might have been like a big helper and you're doing good, but you still are working with every talent I've given you. Every material is from, God. We'll pick it back up in 14. You were an anointed guardian cherub. I placed you. You were on the holy mountain of God. In the midst of the stones of fire you walked. You were blameless in all your ways from the day you were created until you thought you deserved more money for building. You were already so rich, King Hiram of Tyre. So we'll never understand it, but maybe we would if our heart wasn't changed and all we wanted to do was just like get more rich and more rich because wow, everything's working out good, super good. Solomon's other acts. I already read that. This just seems kind of interesting. This is in 1 Kings 11 while there were some other things going on there. God raised up an adversary for Solomon. Let's just read this part here, starting at 29. And at that time, when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him on the road. Now Ahijah had dressed himself in a new garment, and the two of them were alone in the open country. Then Ahijah laid hold of the new garment that was on him and tore it into 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I am about to tear the kingdom from the hand of Solomon. Yikes. And I will give you 10 tribes, but he shall have one tribe for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city that I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, because they have forsaken me and worshiped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians. Now, those Sidonians, the last we heard about them is like, man, nobody can chop down trees like the Sidonians. And they must have done it so good they could get to worship the Ashtaroth people. Chemosh, this says the Elohim of Moab. Malcolm, I believe those are Elohim of the Ammonites. And they have not walked in my ways. I better look it up because some people go like, maybe it's not Elohim that they worship. Well, it is. 430 is the Elohim. But there's a lot of different words for God, you know. Nevertheless, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David. Yay, my servant whom I chose, who kept my commandments. Yeah. and all my statutes. Way to go, man. David. This Kabul, it's really only mentioned two other times, and it's in the region of Galilee. And maybe King Hiram didn't pay enough attention to it. Galilee, it doesn't sound like it was like really, I don't know, it was Nazareth in Galilee because, can any good thing come out of it? But just Galilee, it didn't seem like it was there. So it's only used in Joshua 19:27, the land of Cabul to today, 1 Kings 9. It's made from, Kabul. It's a root word of Kabul, which means Joseph had fetters on his feet. He was bound. And they also use it in Psalm 149:8, and their nobles with fetters of iron. So how about that? Wasn't that good? Could be something going on there. So these Nazis, man, in the United States, they always want to make a big deal like, oh yeah, the 36 where Hitler tried to show off that, the Aryans were great. The United States had the one drop rule at that time. They were as bad, if not worse, in their racial laws than Germany. Why can't we just admit it? This wasn't an anomaly of the Henry Ford and the Brave New World, Charles Lindbergh, and everything else. This happened for a reason. They didn't build these. They probably just found old mud flood buildings. It's all part of the story. The Nazis came with the Operation Paperclip. And so Jesse Owens won. Who cares? Germany didn't care. They won 101 medals, more than anybody else. It wasn't like it didn't work. It wasn't like Jesse Owens could go back and run for mayor. He couldn't vote. He couldn't drink at a white fountain. They were the same politically. And then they hired them after the war to build fake NASA and DARPA. Anyway, this storm in Galveston, this doesn't add up either. Great storms, great fires, great good night. Just, and that brings you to this seawall of Galveston. But not only, we'll have to keep in mind another dramatic effort to protect Galveston was its raising. How many cities do we get raised? Well, they always talk about Chicago and some of the others, but now Sacramento, California, it had to get raised. First time I heard about that one. So that was interesting. But the seawall in Galveston, supposedly this terrible hurricane, deadliest ever, killing people in Canada. It hit here and flowed up, and it was still killing people in Canada. In Canada, it was killing people. 77-mile-an-hour winds, $350,000 worth of damage. It was one of the worst ever storms, and it started in the Gulf of Mexico. Between 52 and 232 people were killed. Oh my goodness. So here's the deal on this. They knew it was coming. They didn't know. They didn't have any warning systems. Even in World War II, they didn't have radar that could predict weather, which is, one of their big excuses. Formerly founded, this was like the capital of Texas at one time. This had was the biggest, most expensive. They said after they rebuilt Galveston, it was never the same. It was never the same because at the time it was the number one town in Texas. It was built on an island, a barrier island, and this is that wall. I believe they had an attempted wall just showing, bodies and corpses. And then the hurricane did that, supposedly. And then they built the Galveston seawall, and it still lasts to this day, and it must be made out of that Roman concrete, and then they lost it again. Otherwise, how has it lasted 120 years? This is a pretty big deal, and another big fake story about how you can raise up cities. What's in Galveston, Texas, anyway? 16, that's 1500 Spanish explorers knew. They called it the Isle of Misfortune or the Isle of Snakes. Well, they're putting the history pretty far back there. 1879, so this was a pretty big deal. Galveston Island, and this is their little breakout of that city where all the money was, I guess. We've really come a long way in this show from the Nazi things, but it's all part of this same, it's that same hidden history, raising all these city swamps and jack screws. And well, we've all seen the pictures. They look fake as all get out, right? Businesses are still open. We jack it up and you won't even know. Like we showed today. Oh, we'll change the track. Well, it took an army to do 10 miles a day, but the United States did it in 36 hours the whole weekend, 14,000 miles. Because they could just do this. We either know it's a lie and the Bible's true, that you're not going to jack up these buildings and just act like nothing happened. Or if you did, it is that massive cover up that you have to stop ignoring the Bible. John Sutter, these people were all Freemasons. They were all dealing. The West Coast was a big deal. Texas was a big deal. There was Freemason, Masonic, elk lodges, Order of the, you name it. The Odd Fellows, that's the one that was slipping my mind. All of these, just Sacramento, the California gold rush. Yeah, it's right there. And Sacramento was one of those jacked up cities in the middle of frickin' nowhere in the 1830s. Could you please give me a break? Pictures of their trains, and I was hoping to get some steampunk. Let's see what we got here. Something with some pictures. Granite Rock Railroad. That sounds interesting. Is it a steampunker? It's just your plain old granite rock. Running around up there in Colorado. Nope, that's California. So there's a picture of that seawall after they got it all fixed up and jacked up. Just made it Galveston into a Starford, I guess. So there's that picture again. Greatest example of resilience in Texas, Great Hurricane of 1900. They rebuilt it. Of course, one of them was named Noble, raised it as much as 17 feet in some places, but it never really caught on. It just didn't work. After the hurricane, they fixed it up, and now it's a tourist trap. I couldn't get this thing. This is weird, right? This whole thing here, but I was lucky it opened up. So many of them didn't. The solution was to dredge the sand from Galveston Skip Harbor, pump it as a liquid slurry through pipes into square mile sections of the city that were walled off, and then the sand would just remain and the water would go and jack screw it up, and then the sand would come up to the new level that they wanted. Yeah, 500 city blocks got raised up, some by as much as 11 feet. By 1911, it was a busy time. Since 1901, 10 years to get the whole town rebuilt, but nobody wanted to move back there. There's another old seawall, the oldest seawall ever discovered, built 7,000 years ago. They were still building seawalls, again, discovered by accident. And then all of a sudden they start getting exposed, and everybody's wondering what the heck is going on. So here's in Seattle. Seattle is another town that got raised. Seattle was raised, and this is a picture of their old. But this one here, it had incorporated ways for the salmon to get through it. I don't know if that was on. So again, in Cuba, they had a seawall. Everywhere there's seawalls, there's a seawall. That's a pretty nice looking one. Looks well built. That ought to last. So they just found another dodecahedron. I think the Lord is telling me I better get on these because I couldn't figure them out before. Very frustrating after I figured out, a lot of other things. So that is frustrating. Galveston destruction. Here's a picture of what they say are those pipes pumping the sand up. I wonder if it's a small picture. Yeah. Oh well, Turkey's still got it. Turkey is where some of the churches in the book of Revelation were written to. They're still finding new and interesting things all over the world, including this, a bucket for baptizing. You know, that's pretty cool. Bronze, nice patterns. So there you go. A lot to cover tonight. And yeah, hello, Hiram. What was going on with that? I'll be checking in with Randy probably in the morning and running that by him and see if that's a keeper because, Hiram dealing with Solomon, lament of, what do we know? We could have gone to Isaiah 14, and that has a description of Satan also, and we'll probably do that very soon. But in the meantime, yeah, those are fake Jews over there, but they're not, let's don't dig in and like, if it wasn't for them, everything would be great, and it'll be great if they could just get out of our way. This isn't ever going to be great again. We can be blessed by the Lord every day. You can have your family, your loved ones, but not soon if you're living in the city. Those days are over. But what's not over? The fact that the Bible's true. And it teaches this is a flat earth nation. The golden age is past because the mud flood was Armageddon. I'm never going to tell you anything else, and neither are my friends. Why would we? We're trying to prove we're called and have your best interest at heart. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho, alo, arrivederci, ciao, sayonara, avita, saying goodbye.